The Law Enforcement Survival Institute and CopsAlive.com welcome you to this Tactical Resilience and Ethical Policing live webcast. Stand by and your hosts will be with you in just a moment. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent.
Why don't we just kick this off? Welcome, everyone. My name is John Marx. I'm the Executive Director of the Law Enforcement Survival Institute. I am going to be your moderator today. I'm joined by Law Enforcement Survival Institute Associate Director, Chaplain Carrie Friedman. Carrie, would you like to say any welcome?
It's great to be here. We've been working on these webinars now the last several months, and the number of people who take advantage of them, either who participate as it's going on, or who then later check it out on the YouTube channel, the Lessie YouTube channel. Those numbers are growing, and we're gratified. We get feedback every once in a while, and that kind of interaction, that's why we do this. We love this. I encourage anybody who is out there listening now or in the future, if you're listening to it when it's already recorded and archived, I encourage you to get in touch with us, because we're here. We do what we do to help you. And I think that this idea of the webinar, the monthly webinar, is a great institution, because instead of us having to go all over the country and we have to wait until your department invites us in, the webinars provide an opportunity for you to connect with us directly and to participate, even if your agency hasn't quite yet gotten around to figuring that out. We can take our message to you people out there directly, and that's great. I encourage you to stay in touch with us. And it's a pleasure, it's an honor to be able to interact with you. John, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I'm playing with the lighting here because it's a dark and dismal day here in Colorado. So sorry about that. So for those of you that are paying attention, we have been talking about mentorship and a variety of things that go with that. I can just see this light is not going to work for me. But today we're going to talk about building integrity. And we have put out 3 different questions. We have said that we will ask, here we go. Oh yes, I said we're gonna ask 3 questions. Can you build integrity? If so, how do you build integrity? And finally, why would you build integrity? I thought that I would start with the Merriam-Webster's definition of integrity, so we at least have a starting point, and then Carrie, I'll ask you to chime in on that as well. But Merriam-Webster online defines integrity as a firm adherence to a code of especially moral or artistic values. It uses the word incorruptibility to associate with that. The second definition includes an unimpaired condition, which it associates with soundness. And finally, it is a quality or state of being, complete or undivided, and it associates that with completeness. It says integrity implies trustworthiness and incorruptibility to a degree that one is incapable of being false to a trust, responsibility, or pledge. That's, I think, a fairly comprehensive definition, but I would defer to the chaplain to hear what your thoughts are about the topic.
I think that's a pretty good definition. I think that integrity, as it relates to law enforcement, the definitions, the various components of that definition are pretty good. The way it relates to significance for a law enforcement career, I think that there's an aspect of it, there's an element of it that wasn't played up strongly enough. It really has to be brought out into bold relief. And that is that integrity is acting in accordance with your beliefs. A person has a moral system, a value system. And in the case of a police officer, for example, they're coming in with their, an innate sense of morality. That innate sense of morality is enhanced. It's supplemented by, for example, adherence to, we're given a constitutional set of system of government. There are protocols and policies that there are laws of this country, there are policies, protocols of an agency, there are all kinds of expectations, all of those things. If a person stays true to all of those, so we can say that they're behaving in integrity, that they possess integrity. But I think that integrity really is exercised when a person adheres to all of those laws, all of those policies, protocols, all of like the spirit of all of those things, when that happens in the face of temptation or difficulty. And that was in the latter part of the definition that you gave, John. It talked about that a person would be incapable of compromising, etc. That notion of compromising, in other words, in the face of something. And I think that's the piece that's really relevant for police officers, which is that the career presents all kinds of temptations, all kinds of difficulties, all kinds of challenges. If a person has absolutely no temptation, if no challenges present themselves, if there's never anything that would be trying to seduce the officer into misbehaving, so then there's no real particular challenge to remain honest and to play by the rules. So we look at a person who, you know, has never been presented with a challenge. We'd say, wow, what a lot of integrity they have. We have no way of knowing that. Integrity really manifests itself, and we can say with any degree of certainty and confidence that a person really has integrity when they act in accordance with those beliefs, that value system they possess. They follow all the rules, even in the face, even when they're being presented with really kind of overwhelming temptations, difficulties, and challenges. Then we can really say, then it would be, you know, fair to say this person has integrity. I think that part, in terms of what we're going to discuss today, I think that's the piece that I intend to focus on, which is in the face of all of those temptations and difficulties and challenges.
Excellent. I love that perspective. Thank you very much for sharing. I'm going to be curious to see how many people are going to want to engage in this discussion, but I encourage all of you to engage, and I thought I would get us rolling. I'm sorry, moved it over here. I got an email from someone from Kelly Wiseman, who was in one of my classes just recently. Kelly is the wellness coordinator for the Osceola County Sheriff's Office in Florida, and she wasn't able to join us live for the discussion today, but she wanted to have some of her thoughts included. So I thought I would just read this, if you'll give me just a second. She said that all change starts with mindfulness, a state of being aware. Being aware is the knowledge or perception of a situation or fact to show concern about a particular situation or development. As all change starts with awareness, usually there is a catalyst that drives change, but not always. All true change requires practice to build to a new or different perspective. I certainly agree with that. I certainly believe that knowledge is a way to present new perspectives, and that is where we have a place in the positive motivation to change. Just because we are doing something now in one fashion does not mean that it cannot be built to a place of grandeur. And I think grandeur is a good word to include when we're talking about integrity. I like that. What would be a grand catalyst, she asks, a motivator? If we wait for a negative event to happen as the catalyst, then we are really working from a place of behind. And she said, someone told her once that to lose your integrity, you can never get it back. She says that has stuck with her, and she agrees that it's true, and I do as well. Integrity builds a framework of trust and care, and one would have to view how that is currently being played out to really have a valid discussion about integrity. So Kelly, thank you very much for your contribution. And I would say this to everyone, we try to do these as live discussions because we want to kind of facilitate some lively discussion. And but we're recording all of these. We put them up on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/CopsAlive for the CopsAlive.com website. And so we invite you to engage. We invite you to send us emails about what topics you'd like to hear. And we invite you to send us your input, even if you can't be here live, because we're more than happy to include that. So let me throw it back to you, Carrie, to either add to what Kelly said, or we can just jump right into the discussion.
I like her observations, and thank you so much for contributing them. And I just would like to echo what John said. Any participation to that contribution is really important, because so much of what we discuss, the topics we choose, the way we discuss them, All of those are really a reaction to the kind of input that we get. We get a lot of inquiries. I get a tremendous number of emails, primarily, or calls. Sometimes people will reach out to me and they'll say, how do I deal with a particular situation? And we use that input. Those questions give us a sense of what's going on out there. In our own travels around the country, going to different police agencies, speaking to police officers, leaders, chaplains, families, etc. We get a sense of the kind of issues that are the most pressing and that are of concern to cops out there. So your feedback, your input is invaluable in helping us craft material that's relevant and that's helpful. So thank you so much. And I think what Kelly said, I think those observations were fantastic. What I want to do, if it's okay, John, and I'll just ask you, you can tell me if that's all right. People who attend my programs or people who have attended these webinars will know that I tend to default back. I like to present certain basic ideas. I've created a framework over the years. It's been it's almost 20 years that I've been doing police training, and I present my 3 accounts of spirituality model. I do it every time, and I try to make sure that whatever we're discussing, I anchor it in that model. So it's not all that difficult to suddenly, to go back to basic first principles. I find that if people are grounded in those, it helps them a lot. So if with your indulgence, John, I'm going to discuss a little bit the 3 accounts of spirituality, and try to explain how that, how that's relevant to the integrity discussion. I believe, and this is a cornerstone of my training, that every person possesses what I call 3 accounts of spirituality. The human being possesses a human spirit. Every person possesses a human spirit. That's the place within us that is the seat of our hopes, dreams, aspirations, our values, the kind of desire that we have to make an impact in the world, to leave a legacy of good, to live for something that's larger than ourselves. I call that the human spirit. Some people call it the soul, whatever term you feel comfortable. It's the part of us that defines us as being profoundly human. And we can discuss spirituality. I'm always talking about spirituality. I'm always very careful to distinguish that from religion. We're not talking about religion. We never touch on religious topics. But we can talk about spirituality, and we can discuss all of the kind of ideas and challenges that are fundamental to the human experience without getting into any kind of uncomfortable religious discussions. These 3 accounts of spirituality, the spirituality, the person's desire to live for some kind of a higher value, expresses itself. There are 3 dimensions to that. There are 3 flavors. I call those 3 accounts. The first one is faith in God. It seems like I just, right away went back to the religious stuff, but I don't mean that. When I talk about God, I mean whatever a person's source, it has to be a source that is absolute and external to the person. It's the source of their highest values. When I talk about God, for most people, a belief in God is the source of that absolute sense of morality. But if that's not your particular source, it could be anything. It could be the constitution of this wonderful country. It could be our system of laws. It could be a sense of a commitment to justice or a belief in the sanctity of human life. Whatever it is that is your source of ethics, again, it should be external and absolute, higher, outside of you. That's account number 1. Faith in that source of your values. Account number 2 is a regard for people, a sense of their importance, a desire to connect with them, to take care of them, to have, like I said, regard for people, that there's a value to human life and that people, every human being, is important. Account number 3 is confidence in self. That's a belief. In the beginning, I used to talk about 3 accounts of spirituality. I would talk about faith in God, faith in people, faith in self. That word is a little charged, so I've changed it. I talk about faith in God, regard for people, confidence in self. Healthy spirituality is to be healthy in all 3 of those dimensions. If you consider those as accounts, like bank accounts, if a person has 3 full accounts, they're healthy. For police officers, the kind of things that they do every day, every human being, but for police officers especially, the kind of experiences they have deprive them. Every experience on the job and in life presents large checks, depletions against those accounts. And if a person ends up with empty accounts, then they're in trouble. I talk about in my training, a person being in spiritual overdraft or bankruptcy. Those are sad, difficult states in which to find oneself. And when people are in those kind of conditions, they misbehave a lot. That's where a lot of police misconduct takes place. But a person, if the depletions take place in the course of doing the job, it's possible to put withdrawals in, to put deposits in as well. A person can replenish those accounts. And that's a lot of what we do at Lessee. We provide tools, tools for intentional spirituality, with which a person can replenish those accounts. So that is the basic model. I refer you to my book, Spiritual Survival for Law Enforcement. I refer you to John's book, Armor Yourself. These are excellent resources, and you'll find that they are filled with all kinds of tools for replenishing those accounts. Integrity, when a person behaves in integrity, now I want to anchor where that fits in with this model. Integrity means that a person has a value system. They believe in something. They subscribe to some notion. They believe they're committed to, they believe in justice or the sanctity of human life, the Constitution. They believe there's a God. They believe in the 10 Commandments. Whatever it is that they believe, that's where we start out. Integrity means acting in accordance with those beliefs. If a person is acting, the expression I like is when a person is acting, they're in integrity with their value system. So their behavior is the same as what they believe. When a person is consistent that way, they're congruent, so then that's the state which allows, there's the potential for a person to feel happy and to feel fulfilled. When a person is behaving not in integrity with what their essential beliefs, there's a certain kind of like dissonance, there's a discordance that takes place within the human soul, and the person can feel a lot of pain. What I have found in the course of time that I've been a police trainer, I've seen this many times, and I will ask you out there to confirm if you've ever seen this. And John, I would ask you to confirm if you've ever seen this. I have noticed that sometimes people get themselves involved in a spiral. It's a downward spiral, and the thing accelerates. It's a tragic, tragic phenomenon to watch. And I've watched it many times, unfortunately. And I've tried with all my might to break that spiral. It goes something like this. A person will misbehave. They'll do something that puts them not in integrity with what they believe. And they will feel, as a result, a little unhappy. They feel not at peace with themselves. They'll wonder why they are not at peace. And in an attempt to numb that pain, they will engage in behaviors. Now, they're not really sure why they're not feeling all that great. They feel kind of yucky. So it is the rare person who can say, I bet I'm not feeling so happy right now because I'm not being true to my value system. I'm not transcending myself. I'm not acting at my absolute optimal ethical best. They don't think in those kind of terms. They think, boy, if only I had more stuff, if only I was wallowing in more pleasure, if only I had more things that I could give expression to whatever it is I want to do. People come up with all kinds of interesting self-serving analyses. A lot of times those analyses lead to behaviors that are even more intensely inappropriate. So then the person, in an attempt to numb that pain, gets involved in some kind of behavior which is even more intense than the original behavior was. And they do that, they engage in that behavior, it's inappropriate, and as a result, shockingly, they feel even worse. And they think to themselves, wow, I'm not feeling happy. How am I going to make myself feel better? So it's a spiral. And that's why I refer to it as a downward spiral, because they keep upping the ante, so to speak, and they keep engaging in more and more inappropriate behaviors. They keep indulging, let's say perhaps the basest part of themselves, the essential, like the primal desires or something, in a mistaken notion that that's the source of their pain. They're not getting enough of that. And the more inappropriately they behave, the more they move themselves away from an equilibrium point of being in consonance with their value system, the unhappier they become, and the more they up the ante, and the more extreme their behavior becomes. You can imagine where that ends. And for many people, it ends in all kinds of wildly inappropriate, often illegal, certainly immoral behavior. And if there was only some way to break that spiral, but the spiral begins and is characterized throughout by a person not being in integrity with their essential values. And for a human being, that's very, very important. If a person is acting in a way which is contrary to what they really, really believe, what their noblest part of themselves, their noblest self believes, if they're not acting in integrity with that, they're going to feel a lot of pain inside. And more often than not, they're not going to realize what the source of that pain is. John, have you ever encountered anybody who has been involved in that kind of a downward spiral?
Yeah, as you're talking, and I've certainly taught with you enough to know, I've heard some of this before, and yeah, absolutely. Before I answer, I just thought I would ask anybody else in the audience want to react to that, because we want to make this an active discussion, not just the two of us talking.
I've seen over the time that we've been doing the webinars that
Well, we don't want to force anybody to talk.
people will come on and we see you, we know that you're there. We respect your desire to be quiet. And sometimes, just listening, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of, you can get a lot of great stuff from this. I will just acknowledge, though, that there have been certain people who have been really brave and have been kind of awesome. Sean a few months ago, Bill a number of times. You and other people have weighed in and contributed. You've given us insights that we do a lot of work, a lot of thinking, a lot of teaching, a lot of interacting, and we still didn't have those insights. So I see you on the side of the screen, a number of you. That's okay. You don't have to talk, and we'll keep talking. As long as what we're saying is relevant and we're hitting the mark, then that's fine. But if you feel at any point in the conversation we've gone off a little bit off the rails or something, or you have a particular insight you'd love to share, we'd love to hear you. But we'll keep going in the meantime and creating a framework within which you can very naturally fit yourselves in.
Yeah, we want you to acknowledge, I mean, this is not meant to be a training. It's not meant to be just us talking at you. We wanted to do this as kind of an engagement. And I will say, just to make sure everybody knows, that when you come onto the call, you are automatically muted. So the controls, at least on my computer, I think on all, are down in the lower left corner of your screen. So if you look down there, there will be a mute, unmute button. So please, if you want to say something, please jump in. Let me respond to what Carrie asked just a second ago. Yeah, I have seen the downward spiral. Actually, as you were talking, I think I probably participated in one or two during my career. I mean, I know there were times where I was intentionally drinking to forget about things and to get drunk. And I think that's what you're talking about. There were times where I was, more impetuous in my life. There were times where I was rebellious in the organization. So I certainly am thrilled in my life that it didn't spiral down to a place where I couldn't recover. And I think that's one of the things we need to say here. I think that's going to be where this topic is going to go, is that, I think that for the most part, you can recover unless you get too far gone and too far down in the spiral that Chaplain Friedman talked about. And, now as I think back on what I read from Kelly, I think I agreed with her that, once you lose your integrity, you can't get it back. I understand that mentality, but now that I'm sort of talking it through, which is kind of why we're doing this, I'm not so sure that you can't get it back. So, Carrie, I have absolutely seen what you've described. I've seen people lose their careers because of it. I've seen people lose their marriages because of it. I've seen people, law enforcement officers, be arrested because of it. So that is what we don't want to see happen. And part of the reason we all teach in the wellness arena, we believe that resilience and spiritual survival build our competence and our capacity in law enforcement. And we want to make sure that you're all as healthy and capable as you can possibly be. And that's why we teach, that's why we write, that's why we do these kind of discussions. So let me throw it back to you. I've certainly seen some examples, and I think this is a great way to get into the discussion. I think our first question is, can you build on your integrity?
So I would say that it's certainly possible to build it up, to strengthen it. That notion, can you recover it? It's an excellent question. It's a very important one. My belief is that other than like in absolutely extraordinarily rare circumstances, a person can always recover it. Recovering it might mean different things for different people. In my training, when I said a minute ago, I described that downward spiral. And I talked about it in very general kinds of terms. John, when you responded, you gave some specific examples. You talked about drinking and self-medicating. There are other kinds of behaviors. What I do when I do a day or two or three of training is one of the first things I'll describe a certain trajectory, a certain path that people walk. There are half a dozen, perhaps steps in the process that describe the downward spiral. and I will describe it in very, very concrete terms. And what I will find very often is that police, attendees, the students, whether they be cops, whether they be admin, whether they're wherever they are in the chain of command up the ladder, whoever they are, very often I'll be talking, and I'll notice that people start kind of getting choked up, tearing up. There's like a little ring around their eyes, and they recognize themselves. And the question I end up, I get all the time is there any way to recover that? How is it possible to walk backwards along that trajectory and to get back to a place of, if not naive idealism with which they started, but perhaps a mature idealism, to somehow get rid of some of the garbage, the sediment, the tarnish, the various layers that cover over the human spirit and account for those misbehaviors? Is it possible to walk it backwards? And in the training that we give, I believe it's absolutely possible. The thing is, John is talking about people being let out in handcuffs, etc. Sometimes it's not always possible to go back to the original primal state, but I've been involved in training. I've sat through programs, John, let me know if you've had the same thing, where people went through some pretty tough stuff. They ended up not in the same place in the career where they had been, but then they took those experiences and they used them to go and to teach other people, other cops, young people, or old cops, how to avoid the kind of mistakes that did them in. And that too has a value. If a person is able to take their experience and to recover their value system and to become a person of integrity again, there's a lot of good that they can do. So wherever you happen to find yourself along the continuum, Dr. Kevin Gilmartin, he wrote an article, really a phenomenal article back, I think in 1998. He talks about the continuum of compromise, where people can walk along and they get more and more extreme in their misbehavior. It starts out originally with little small kinds of acts of omission. As time goes on, a person can graduate to acts of commission. Acts of omission, they're just leaving certain things out. They're not doing certain things, not doing what they could be optimally. Acts of commission become acts of actually doing something. I think his categories, if I recall, acts of commission, there are administrative kinds of things, and then at the far extreme are acts of commission, which are actual criminal acts. And that's a continuum. In the training that I do, I teach people how to kind of ratchet that down and get back to a certain place of integrity and idealism. So it absolutely can be recovered in whatever form. If you get in touch with us, in other words, on a case-by-case basis, we're certainly always happy to help. In general sense, what we're going to do today is give, I think, a few kind of tools to recover it, and best of all, to preempt it, to avoid it in the first place. Because if we can teach you how to do that, that'd be the best result of all. So we have a few, I think, powerful tools that we can share with you today as to how to avoid this problem in the first place.
Excellent. Any other comments? Okay. So I think we've answered the question, can you build integrity? I think we have kind of a resounding yes. Even responding to what Kelly had submitted, I guess it depends on to what degree you would lose your integrity. So I think that's a part of the question we're going to leave for individual exploration. As I started doing some research, I obviously believe you can build it. I certainly have written about it, but I was kind of curious what other people write. And interestingly enough, I found in the business world, it seems to be a pretty hot topic. Let me see if I can find what I copied out of there. Success Magazine, which is a magazine that I enjoy. I think they do an excellent job. They reported in 2017, 9 tips to help you strengthen your integrity. They said, first, fulfill your promises, keep your appointments, make a decision before you make a commitment to decide whether you can make that commitment and feel comfortable in saying no. Examine how you react in knee-jerk situations. I think we could probably elaborate on that a little bit. Polish your communication skills, because I think a lot of times we lose some of our integrity just in the things we say, the stupid things that come spitting out of our mouth when we are not thinking. And then they suggest to consider your habits and skills that you can develop to enhance your integrity. I think that kind of leads into what we teach. So I think to answer the question specifically, we agree that you can build integrity. So let's talk about how to build integrity. So let me throw that back to you, Carrie, unless somebody wants to jump in and let you start on that. And I have some ideas on that as well.
Okay. Before I talk about some concrete ways, and John, who is the best, I mean, he's the executive director of the Law Enforcement Survival Institute. He's the best guy to work for. He's awesome, but he can sometimes be a little tough because, and I admire this aspect. He always cautions anyone who does any training. He says you can't just raise the problem. You can't just say, "Oh, this is how people get themselves into trouble." You have to conclude with, "And this is something concrete. These are practical tools." Every training session has to have powerful insights, but they have to have equally powerful tools, because if you can't do something practically, what's the point? I mean, I guess there's some value in knowing what's happening, but if you can't actively work on it and, like, change the course or, reverse it or something, so then, really what have you accomplished? And John has sensitized me to that over the last 5 years that we're working together. So I'm very careful always to make sure that, most of the presentation will be very concrete and practical. Just, prepare yourself for that. I just want to mention that before I start giving those practical insights, those practical tools, what I was talking about before is that, I want to make sure that when I talk about, the 3 accounts of spirituality, we're not talking about integrity because we're making some kind of an appeal to your high-minded self. In other words, boy, we really want you to act in some noble, heroic way just 'cause. You should act nobly and heroically. I agree with that, and it should be done just 'cause, absolutely. But I think the important thing to remember is that this is not a luxury that you have. This isn't extra credit. In order to be a person who feels fulfilled and who feels whole and who feels happy, you need to act in integrity and you need to possess idealism. Because what I was talking about before, when a person misbehaves and they act without integrity, what they're doing is they're depleting that 3rd account, the account of confidence in self. A person, the human spirit within the human being, watches. And if he or she misbehaves, so something very deep inside of them, in that human spirit, it feels pain. It feels pain because it knows it's capable of behaving differently. It wants to behave in a certain way. And when the person actually, when it comes down to it, behaves in ways which are inappropriate, the greatest, there are so many disastrous consequences. It's bad for the department. It's bad for the profession. It's bad for the community. It's bad all around, and all kinds of terrible things result. But the appeal, I'm appealing to your self-interest here. And I'm saying like this: if you misbehave, you're hurting yourself as well, because something deep inside of you is going to feel pain, because you're betraying yourself and the person that you want to be and the things that you want to do in the world. So if you behave properly and you fill up that 3rd account, confidence in self, that account is filled up, every time you behave properly, the inside of you is watching, the essential part of you is watching and says, wow, I'm awesome. I'm behaving in integrity with my essential values. And each time you do that, and you stop, you take a moment, and you recognize what you're doing, you congratulate yourself for having done that, it's another deposit into that account. And if that account is full, and it's brimming, it's pouring over, it's so full, that's the way that a person gets to a place of real fulfillment and inner peace. You can't have inner peace. You can't be at peace with yourself. You can't be happy if you're at odds, if you're in conflict with yourself. And behaving out of integrity, violating, betraying your value system is going to produce incredible, incredible unhappiness within you. So what we're doing here today is we're appealing to you on so many different levels. The community needs it. The profession, the honor of the profession needs it. Your agency demands it. Every possible reason to do it. The most important, if only this, and this appeal to self-interest, you need it most of all. If you behave in integrity, you have the potential for being happy. Okay, now, With that said, let's talk about a little bit some of the practical kind of features of integrity, some of the tools, how you build it, etc. I would think that integrity, I like to refer to it, it's a perishable skill. You're familiar with that term, perishable skills? There are all kinds of skill sets that you possess that are perishable. You can't just say, well, I once learned to shoot, I once learned defensive tactics, so I'm good. Those skills dissipate, they atrophy with time, and they need to be replenished all the time. Integrity is a perishable skill in that if you don't pay attention to it, it just naturally dissipates with time. That's in the absence of any corrupting influence, just on its own. The nature of integrity, idealism, is that it dissipates with time. There are a number of features of a law enforcement career that accelerate, though, that it contribute to that depletion, that dissipation of integrity. For example, if you spend all of your time around people who are misbehaving and whose value systems are perverse value systems, they keep preaching a doctrine of situational ethics, for example. Well, that person did something to me, so I'm just responding. When you hear all kinds of things and you look around, so without even being aware of it, human beings are designed in a way, our brains work a certain way, we're biochemical, we're programmed that we're influenced by the people around us. We take in all kinds of experiences. Anything that we observe, we take it in and it becomes a part of ourselves. So when we spend most of our time around people who don't possess integrity, who are not idealistic, so we naturally absorb a lot of those kinds of attitudes as well, and it speeds up the already natural process of dissipation. The components of integrity are, for example, ethical clarity, a clear sense of right and wrong. It's possessing a reserve of willpower. It's having self-discipline. All of those component features of integrity that go in together, you put them all together and they produce what we see on the surface as integrity. Each one of those is perishable by nature, gets depleted over time and has to be replenished. John, are you want to weigh in on that? I think that's...
Well, I was just smiling because I think I love when we teach together, and I love when we collaborate like this, because it amazes me how a lot of what we teach and suggest kind of, they interrelate. Let me back up for just a second and share just a quick overview of what I believe in my teaching in the program I do called Armor Yourself, which is kind of the basis for what I teach, and it's the title of the book. But the basics of Armor Yourself are that there are 4 domains to the human being, and when we're talking about building health and wellness, and particularly comprehensive wellness, we need all 4 domains. So that includes the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, in my definition. When Dr. Potterat and Chaplain Friedman and I teach together, each of us has a different definition about the self, the human self. I use 4 domains, both of them use 3, but they're similar. But the reason I differentiate the emotional and the mental is I believe one of them is cognitive. The mental piece is cognitive functions like problem solving and language skills and memory. And I just don't think you mix that with what we call mental health, which I think is the emotional piece. I think this discussion about integrity falls squarely in the spiritual component. As Chaplain Friedman said, and it's the reason that we collaborate, is because he teaches it so much better than anyone else I've seen, including me, that you don't have to get upset about religious beliefs when we're talking about things like integrity. It doesn't matter what your religious background or belief is. It's something that's mandated in our profession. It's something that's a critical requirement. It's the public trust. And so that spiritual piece is right where we have to be. When you talk about, let me say one more thing. When I talk about building strength in those 4 domains, when you're strengthening yourself physically, and we can all relate to physical fitness, you lift weights, you do reps, you run, you swim, whatever. we understand how to build physical strength. I'm not sure that we always understand the other three domains, but I think it's the same. I think strengthening requires repetitive conditioning in all four domains. That includes the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. But most people don't understand that strengthening in the physical and the mental domain are very active. You go and do things. But strengthening in the emotional and spiritual domains requires that you be passive. They require inactivity. And I think a lot of people don't connect with that. But I just heard Chaplain Friedman describe, how little deposits to your self-esteem, to the account about yourself, can enhance your integrity. That's a strengthening technique. He just threw it out there. I think most people missed it. But by doing simple things, you're strengthening your integrity. That's part of the conditioning practice. I think there are other ways that you can condition. The Success Magazine suggestions were right there. I wish that I had done my homework because I'm not going to remember his name off the top of my head, but there's a young man out there. If you Google the term "because I said I would," he started a movement a number of years ago that's worldwide now, and it's all about adhering to your commitments, and making a commitment to yourself is part of that. I believe his name is Alex, and I'm just struggling to remember his name, but "because I said I would" is a true example of doing simple things to strengthen your integrity every day. With every commitment that you make and don't break, you're strengthening your integrity. And so it doesn't take a massive commitment to run for the highest office in the land. It doesn't require that you go into to a monastery or take over the leadership of a religious teaching. It is simple little things you do every day that can add to your integrity, or as Chaplain Friedman says, to those 3 bank accounts. So I have a couple others, but I've kind of belabored that. Let me throw it back to you again. Let me ask first of all if anybody else wants to jump in. Oh, you are going to be a quiet crowd today. No problem. There is no pressure here. But let me throw it back to you, Carrie. So what I just said, does that resonate with what you're thinking as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Willpower, self-discipline, we were talking about before, are built by saying no to oneself. If you think about it, when do we say no to ourselves? And those kind of, John was describing those little kind of actions. Each one of them, it's a cumulative effect. It builds towards the creation of a personality that knows how to control itself. It's amazing how much we're driven by some of our primal instincts and desires. And this definition of being human is to control those. The more we control, the more we learn to control them, the nobler we become. I'm chuckling because we've done this now. This is our 4th or 5th webinar. And inevitably, when the thing is over, in the next several hours and the next several days, we will receive, John will receive, I will receive emails or calls from some of the people, and we've become friendly with some of you out there. We've interacted many times, and we've done some consulting on some of the projects that are of interest to you, and we love doing that. But as I mentioned before, the feedback we're going to get is going to be great. If only you would give that right now, because everybody would benefit from it. I enjoy the feedback in the emails. Your colleagues would get a lot out of them. So I encourage you. It's not so scary to talk. It's a little scary, but not so scary. And you're amongst friends. So if you want to unmute and make yourself visible, I can see on the screen on the side, John and I can see them. There are people who...
I can see you waving.
Great.
We're not going to pressure you. Here, let me take it back, because I just Googled because I said I would. It is becauseIsaidIwould.com. The young man's name is Alex Sheen. I give all credit to him for taking a really simple idea and turning it into a worldwide movement, from simple little things you can do to gigantic things you can do. And if you write to him, he will send you some cards that look like business cards that have the words "because I said I would" printed on the bottom. You make a simple pledge to whomever or whatever you're doing, and you give that card to them, and it's a commitment. And when you fulfill the commitment, they give it back to you. And I think it's an incredibly ingenious, simple idea that just has tremendous power. So, you know, going back to the concept of doing simple things to build integrity, to build strength spiritually. Again, I think what we're doing here is part of that. I think this is an integrity building exercise right now, participating in this discussion, even if you're just listening, because we are challenging our belief systems, and integrity is an integral part of that. And so we encourage, as part of your own strengthening, taking this topic and taking this discussion back to your office, to your roll call, to your dispatch center, to your family dinner table, and actually having a discussion. I mean, you could have the same discussion with your children, but I think it's truly one that's mandated in our profession. We ought to be talking about this in public. We ought to be talking about this in roll call. What simple things can we do today to strengthen our integrity? So, Carrie, back at you.
Okay, so I think there are two parts. Now, this is we're about 12:45. That means that you know, we've been talking since noontime. So we've spent 3/4 of our allotted time discussing, creating a certain framework. There's already been some practical stuff in it. The last part of this, you know, in other words, the last quarter is just pure practical things. So let's talk about those. I think there are two aspects to what we're advocating for today. Number one is to build integrity, and number two, right, if you remember the definition we presented at the very beginning, we talked about integrity as acting in accordance with your beliefs, even in the face of temptations and challenges and difficulties. So I think that in order to be really successful, we can talk about, number one, building integrity. In other words, when those difficulties, those challenges, those temptations present themselves, having the robustness, the strength of character to be able to confront them and triumph over them. That's number one. Number two is a really clever kind of set of strategies, which is, why not anticipate and minimize those temptations and challenges and dangers to integrity in the first place? It's not like it's voodoo or something that we could never imagine what kind of temptations would arise in the job. It's possible to identify certain classes, certain types of temptations and difficulties and challenges that will arise naturally in the course of performing the law enforcement duties, the job. So again, I think there are two components. One is to build integrity, and number two is to minimize temptation. There's a cost. Each time a person is confronted with a temptation, if they succeed and they actually manage to weather that temptation storm, it nevertheless depletes their reserve of willpower. So it would be possible to minimize the cost. Like, how much does that temptation drain? How much willpower does it drain? You can minimize the cost, the magnitude of the challenge. So let's talk about both of those different types of processes. In terms of building integrity, I think building integrity means that a person has to have ethical clarity. That's the first thing. In other words, before you can say, I'm going to behave in a proper way, you have to know what proper is. You have to know what proper is. So there, you just need to, with time, when we're out, people are out there in the field interacting with people who are telling them crazy things. They're telling them all kinds of immoral things. That person did this to me, so I responded by this, like this. So you look and it's like, this is not jungle morality. This is not the law of, the Wild West or something, where might makes right. It's important to first clarify, and a person needs regular infusions. This is the most important tool I can tell you. Regular infusions of inspiration. In other words, integrity it begins with the desire to behave properly. When a person is idealistic and they say, I want to stand for something in the world, I want to do good in the world, I want to be a force for good, I want to leave a legacy of good for those who will follow. So first and foremost, the person has to have a commitment to behaving properly, and they have to know what proper is. So I would invite each of you to think to yourselves, wait, who taught me? How do I know what right is? For some people, when I was a kid, I'm not embarrassed to say this, my parents modeled for me noble, wonderful, moral behavior, but so did the Batman. I was as a little kid, I was obsessed with the Batman. And that notion of standing for something, being heroic, was very, very meaningful. I remember watching Zorro when I was a little kid. I'm still a little older, I'm not as old as times in the radio shows and things like that, but I'm from not too long after that. The fact is that in our culture and in our various traditions that we have, there are concepts of heroism. There are models, whether they're real or they're fictional. Connect back with those examples. Who are the models for you of proper behavior? You need to have, for some people, it could be interacting with religious figures, religious teachings. It could be reading the Bible. Whatever it is that works for you, you need to have regular infusions. They have to be frequent. You decide what the frequency is. You decide the nature of that. If you had an uncle, an aunt who inspired you, they were a sheriff's deputy, or they worked a vice, or they were somebody out there, working in a soup kitchen or whatever, and you took them as your inspiration, so figure out a way to reconnect with that. I think that if we have these regular infusions, sometimes we find ourselves, we drift a little bit downstream and we don't even realize it. And over time, if someone were to ask us and we were to be talking about our ethical values, we would sound a little bit like off. We're off balance. We're not where we started. So if you can figure out ways periodically to get yourself back to that ethical start, I think that in and of itself is a huge accomplishment. So read the right kind of materials to be inspired, interact with people who inspire you, who inspired you and who still inspire you. John is fond of speaking at times. He's mentioned people with whom he worked, people who were real inspirations. In other words, in the course of a long, difficult career, they nevertheless remained ethical people, grounded ethically. They were noble, they were heroic, they were idealistic. It's possible, right? It's possible, John. I've known people who have been involved in a law enforcement mission for decades. And they retained their, not naive idealism, but mature idealism. And they were people who it's inspiring to be around them. Would you agree?
Yeah. And let me elaborate on something else that you said earlier, because I'm going to give you kudos for one of the projects you're involved in. But in some of the material that I wrote in Armor Yourself, I talked about strengthening in this particular area is a little bit more passive. It involves, less active conditioning. So you might include things like introspection, contemplation, writing, and discussion. So what I would ask, your agency probably has a mission statement. Your agency probably has, list of values, and probably has a code of honor. The International Association of Chiefs of Police provides a model code of honor if you don't have one. But instead of thinking on the agency perspective, maybe you should think on your own perspective. Maybe you should write your own list of values. I hope that integrity is one of them. Maybe you should write your own code of ethics. Maybe you should write your own code of honor. Maybe you should write your own mission statement. And Carrie, I'm going to throw back to you. I know you were involved in a project that was about writing ethical codes, and maybe you want to share a little bit about that.
We were involved. I was working with the Phil Account from Texas, and we created a little booklet about creating one's own credo. An essential statement of your own beliefs and why that's important, clarifying like your core values. And then the booklet describes different ways to put those into practice. Phil's organization is Police USA. He has a number of organizations, as well as Junior Police Academy. He's a great guy. The booklet is a very, very practical, very, very helpful resource. If you get in touch with us, I'll get you a copy of it. The elements of it appeared in the FBI's law enforcement bulletin a few years ago, and people from all over the world were getting in touch with me, as far away as Australia. They were all over the world, asking for help, practical help in creating a credo. And people reported that it helped them a lot. So John's point, you know, that in some quadrants it requires actual exercises and more, you know, more active kind of things. These require a certain amount of reflection and introspection. I think there's a lot of truth to that. So what we're talking about now, the first tool we've been talking about is being involved in that kind of introspective, reflective process of clarifying what is real, what's important. I would add to that, if I may, John, can I give a few more? Okay. Yeah, so I would say like this. I think that the human capacity to rationalize away misbehavior, to delude ourselves, to convince ourselves that the thing that we really want in the depths of our being, that our id wants, is really very noble and very correct, it seems that capacity is almost endless. When we want something deeply, it could be incredibly immoral, and our intellects get harnessed to the process of producing propaganda to rationalize away and convince ourselves that really it's a great thing to do. That whole process, that corrupted process, takes place within every individual. So what I would suggest is that it's important to have objective reference points that are external to you, an objective outside party. If you have a friend, a mentor, any kind of other person who is outside, who can watch what's going on, they see clearly. They see with clarity that you don't possess. And if you were able to turn to somebody and say, and that's what we've been talking about the last couple of months, the last 2 or 3 webinars, we were talking about peer support, having colleagues who can play that role, having mentors, role models who can play that role, but you have to be willing. You have to enlist. You have to create a community of people. You create a community. It could be one other person, somebody you trust, and somebody, the two of you made a pact. We're going to pursue appropriate behavior. We're going to be ethical. We're going to behave with integrity. We're going to behave consistently with our, in integrity, consistently with our noblest values. So if you have somebody, you can turn to them. You have to be willing to make yourself a little vulnerable. You have to be honest with them, and they'll return the favor. They'll be honest to you. If you have that partner who can be your backup, and you can confide what you're thinking. So if you're willing to hear no, if you're willing to hear the truth from another person whom you trust, you have to cultivate a relationship of trust. But if you can have somebody who is outside and external to you, they'll say to you, I see what you're doing. What are you thinking? What are you thinking? And poof, it's possible just in a minute, all of the illusions, the delusions that you built up will just, like the clouds, will just part and they'll disappear. So I can't emphasize strongly enough. I can't suggest that it's important. I think it's one of the best resources you can do is to cultivate, become part of a community of people who are like-minded, whom you trust and who trust you, and you can be brutally honest with them. And they can be feel comfortable to be brutally honest with you as well. That is if you have some kind of an external resource of other people. I have seen somebody actually taught me this technique many years ago. It sounds a little funny when you first hear it. I'm going to float it. I've used it to advantage over the decades. I hope it helps you. Sometimes when I'm considering a certain course of action, I will use this tool. I will say to myself, I'm pretty convinced about a certain course of action. I'm going to assume, even though it sounds perfectly clear. Now, this is if you don't have another person, you can bounce these ideas off. You can do this with yourself to a degree. You say to yourself like this: the course of action that I'm contemplating, something about it, it's not right. I'm just saying, you just say this no matter, even if it seems perfectly right to you. And you say, what could my motives be? What could my motives be in deciding on this course of action? So what you do is you brainstorm. Do not in any way edit it. Do not censor it. Don't stop. Write down every possibility that you can come up with, no matter how far-fetched, no matter how unlikely, no matter how crazy it may seem. Write down every possible motivation you might have. The most outrageous, the most immoral, it doesn't matter. Put down everything you possibly can. The exercise works because very often when we concretize something and we make it external to ourselves, we're able to step back. It's different than us. When the drama is taking place within ourselves, it's very, very difficult to police ourselves, so to speak. It's very difficult to have the kind of objectivity and the dispassion to look and say, oh, I think that's what I'm thinking. But if you put it down in a list, And again, don't censor it in any way. Write down everything. Then you stand back. Now that list, those motives are external to you. And then a few minutes later, look at that list. Go through each one and say, is that my motive? Could that be? I have used this technique, and what I can tell you is that it works. I have on a few occasions been able to identify within myself some less than noble motivations for behaviors that I was considering performing. I was thinking about engaging in certain kind of behaviors. And when I did this exercise, I created that list and I externalized it, and I recovered, for so to speak, a certain degree of objectivity. When I look back at that list, I found my motive on there. And I was like, wow, that's what I was going to do. That was what was driving me. And I decided to cease and desist from pursuing that particular course of action. John, do you want to weigh in on any of this so far?
Yeah, and we're reaching the top of the hour, so we'll probably have to wrap up. But my thought is, some of you wanted some real action steps here. But we're talking about writing. We're talking about talking. We're talking about, contemplation. And it doesn't seem like it's an active kind of strengthening process, but it is. With writing your own credo or writing a mission statement or a list of values, we talk about finding true north, but even a compass needs some guidance to find true north. And that's the magnetic fields of the earth. Once you write some of these things down, they are your cornerstone that you can go back to. Once you've discussed them and you've built a mentorship with someone else, you can go back to that and revisit it. And these are the things that continuously strengthen you over a period of time, not just doing it once, but doing it repetitiously. Let me just close by the last question we asked, which I think we've already addressed, was why do we build integrity? I think both of us have talked about that. I think it's a mandate. It's part of the public trust. It's for your own health. But we'll continue the discussion. We'll do another one of these in a month.
John, I'm so sorry. Would it be possible? I know that we're at the top. We're at the top of we're more or less run. If we have a minute or two, I would like to just throw out a couple of headlines. In other words, some tools to actually pursue what those could be. I would invite you to get in touch with us. But at least if they're out there, even if you hear the word, if you hear the sentence, it might be meaningful to you. So would you indulge me?
Yep.
Okay.
And remember, everybody, blame Carrie for running over the hour.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I talked about the second part of that, the second process, which was minimizing the temptations and the dangers to integrity, minimizing, kind of lowering the cost of what they are. So let me just give you a couple of ideas, and then we can pursue those in the future, or I invite you, please get in touch with me. I would say like this. Sometimes one of the features, the most dangerous feature of these kind of temptations is their suddenness, their unexpectedness. We're living our lives, and in the course of going about our business, suddenly these opportunities jump out at us. They just jump out, and we're unprepared for them. And that lack of preparation, John had written that he read that list before of ways to build integrity. One of the ideas on there was something about the unexpected, the novelty of things. So what I would tell you is that if you can anticipate, and you can in advance work through the scenarios, you have a much better chance of, you minimize the cost, and the chance that those temptations will have any power over you, you deprive them of a lot of their bite. So what I would tell you, people talk about the power of previous decision. If a person were to sit down periodically and to say, I'm not going to succumb when I am confronted with opportunities, the potential to misbehave, I'm not going to do it. The power of previous decision, in other words, you don't want, when the opportunity arises, you don't want to be standing there thinking to yourself, well, let's see, should I not? No. Once you're asking that question, you're already in danger. What you want to do is to have asked that question and to have resolved it, to have answered it hundreds of times in the past, to say to yourself, wait a second, when I'm given the opportunity, when my time arrives and I have a chance to do such and such a behavior, an inappropriate behavior, how am I going to behave? I'm not going to misbehave. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And the power of saying absolutely not to oneself, right? What you could do is like this: anticipate what kind of things arise in the course of doing your job. They're kind of repetitive. You see the same potential, the same challenges arise over and over again, run through those, identify them, make a list of all the possibilities you can think of, and then look at them, each one in turn, and say, no, absolutely not. The power of previous decision, the power in that is incalculable. What I would say is like this, right? You're taught in training, when it comes, for example, in physical survival, you don't think in terms of if, then. If, then, that's wrong, because if implies it might not happen to me. I might go through my entire police career and it will never happen that I'll encounter this danger. So what happens is, if you think in those terms, you're already in danger, because when inevitably the danger presents itself, the cop's first reaction is to think, wow, my gosh, I always wondered, would this ever happen to me? That process of surprise and of reacting, thinking, oh my gosh, I always wondered, that deprives the police officer of precious time and the ability to react immediately. So far better than if, then kind of scenario training is when, then. Make the decision, decide, I know this is going to happen. Therefore, if you do that, when the situation arises, you don't lose precious time. You can hit the ground running. You say, oh my gosh, I knew this was going to happen. I'm already prepared. Don't think in terms of if, then. That's true in all quadrants of survival of the law enforcement profession. You never think in terms of if, then, because you're already losing ground. Think in terms of when, then. These temptations, these dangers, these challenges, they're going to arise. Steel yourself in advance. Prepare yourself. They're going to be here. How are you going to behave? How are you going to respond? So much of what we're talking about is in our heads. We're making all these intellectual decisions. What we do, how we behave, is so little a function of what we think. It's a function of how we feel. So you don't want to think your decision about integrity. You want to feel it in your guts. There are ways to emotionalize a truth. If you know something to be true in your head, it's how you bridge the divide from head into heart, into your guts. That's the key to success. So these truths that we're talking about, you want to emotionalize them. You make them apart. It's not what you know in life, it's how you know it. And if the how you know it is deep in your guts, when the time comes, you'll have the emotional fortification. People they respond based on how they feel, what their gut tells them, much more than what their head tells them. If you can take the long view, the perspective, when something arises, don't think to yourself, what's the short-term gain of this? Train yourself, teach yourself. You can become a kind of person who looks at any situation and says, what's the long-term cost of this? I'm playing the long game. I'm taking the long-term, the future-oriented perspective. And if you do that, a lot of things that in the short term look really fun and there's a huge payoff, they come with unbelievable costly consequences down the line. So I just mentioned 3 or 4 tools. They're very powerful. If you want me to elaborate on them, to give you a little bit more substance, the power of previous decision, anticipating dangers that can arise, depriving them of their novelty, right? Thinking not in terms of if then, but when then, emotionalizing the process and taking the long view perspective. These are tools we could have spent hours talking about them. I mention them just as topic, as chapter headings. If you get in touch with John or with me or with the Law Enforcement Survival Institute, we'll give you all kinds of resources of turning those tools into powerful, powerful realities for you and the people you care about in your law enforcement profession. John, I'll turn it back over to you. I'm sorry I hijacked the process. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for participating, for being with us, for joining us on this discussion. The recording of this will be posted on our YouTube channel. If you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us through our Law Enforcement Survival Institute website or the CopsAlive website. Again, I'm John Marks. This was Chaplain Kerry Friedman. We were talking about building integrity, and we really didn't build up to a topic for next month, but we'll figure something out. And until then, we invite you to stay safe and stay well, and we will talk to you again in another month. Take care.
All the best to you. Take care. Thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us on this Tactical Resilience and Ethical Policing live webcast. Your hosts today were John Marx, the Executive Director of the Law Enforcement Survival Institute and author of the book Armor Yourself, How to Survive a Career in Law Enforcement, and Carrie A. Friedman, law enforcement chaplain and the author of the books Spiritual Survival for Law Enforcement and Wisdom from the Batcave. We appreciate your joining us and invite you to stay in touch with us by visiting either CopsAlive.com, our training site at lawenforcementsurvivalinstitute.org, or this website at tacticalresilience.org and use the drop-down tab for the online training. Please join us for this semi-regular monthly webcast. You can also find replays on our CopsAlive YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/CopsAlive. Thanks very much. Stay safe and stay well.